Instructor Xylar looked at the pile of twisted metal smoke that used to be a combat robot. Then, he looked at the small, soft-skinned human standing next to it. For years, Xylar taught his students that strength meant having sharp claws, thick scales, and heavy armor. He looked at the human named Jack and laughed, thinking he was nothing but a weak prey animal. But he was wrong. Dead wrong. As Xylar watched the human smile after tearing a steel machine apart with his bare hands, he realized a terrifying truth: the galaxy had judged humans by their cover. They weren't prey. They were the monsters that other monsters were afraid of, and class was about to begin. The main training hall of the Imperial Galactic Military Academy was cold and silent. It was a massive room made of gray steel, designed to hold the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Instructor Xylar walked to the center of the room. He was a Krell, a tall and terrifying creature with hard, green scales covering his body. He had 4 powerful arms and sharp claws that clicked when he moved. Xylar was famous for being a cruel teacher. He believed that only the biggest and strongest species deserved to be warriors. To him, strength was about size, armor, and sharp teeth. He looked at the new group of students with a sneer on his face. The new recruits stood in a straight line. Most of them looked like monsters from a nightmare. There were the Groks, who looked like walking boulders made of rock. There were the Vipers, tall lizard people with poisonous fangs. There were even a few insect creatures with exoskeletons as hard as iron. The room smelled of ozone and musk. Every student there looked like a killing machine. But at the very end of the line, there was something different. It was small. It had no claws. It had no scales. It was a human named Sergeant Jack. Xylar walked slowly down the line. He nodded at the rock creatures and the lizards. He approved of their natural weapons. But when he reached the end of the line, he stopped. He looked down at Jack. The human was only 6 feet tall, which was very short compared to the 8-foot aliens. Jack was wearing a simple gray uniform. He had no visible armor. His skin looked soft and pink, easily cut by even a dull knife. To the alien instructor, Jack looked like a pet, not a soldier. Xylar made a loud, clicking sound that was laughter for his species. The instructor turned to the rest of the class and pointed a claw at Jack. He used the human as a lesson for everyone else. He told the class to look at the creature. He explained that this was what evolutionary failure looked like. He pointed out that the human had no fur to keep warm, no shell to stop bullets, and flat teeth that were useless for tearing meat. The other aliens began to chuckle. They looked at Jack with pity. They wondered how such a soft, squishy thing had survived long enough to reach the academy. They thought he must be a mistake or a joke sent by the administration. Jack did not move. He did not look at the ground in shame, and he did not look angry. He stood perfectly still in a military stance known as parade rest. His hands were clasped behind his back, his feet were shoulder-width apart, and his chin was up. His face was completely blank. He was breathing slowly and rhythmically. To the aliens, this lack of reaction looked like fear. They thought he was frozen with terror. They did not know that on Earth, this was the sign of a disciplined veteran who had seen things much worse than an arrogant lizard. Xylar leaned down close to Jack's face. He wanted to see the human flinch. He wanted to smell the fear pheromones. The instructor hissed and asked if the human was lost. He mocked Jack, asking if he needed a nanny to protect him from the big, scary soldiers. Xylar expected the human to shake or stutter. But then, Jack locked eyes with him. The human's eyes were dark and focused. They did not blink. For a split second, Xylar felt a strange sensation in his gut. It was a cold, primal feeling. In the wild, most prey animals have eyes on the sides of their heads to look for danger. But Jack's eyes were on the front of his face. They were binocular. They were the eyes of a predator. Xylar ignored the feeling quickly, dismissing it as nonsense. He stood up straight and laughed again. He told the class that they would have fun breaking the soft creature in the gravity chamber. He did not know that he had just challenged the most dangerous animal in the room. The class moved down the hallway to the gravity chamber. This was the most feared room in the entire academy. It was a circular room with a floor made of thick, magnetic plates. Along the walls, there were observation windows made of reinforced glass. Instructor Xylar marched the students inside and sealed the heavy blast doors. He walked up to the control booth that overlooked the room. He looked down at the students through the glass with a cruel smile. He announced that today they would test their structural integrity. He wanted to see whose bones were strong and whose were weak. He placed his claw on the control dial. Xylar started the test at standard galactic gravity. For most of the students, this was comfortable. The insect creatures clicked their mandibles, and the lizard people stood tall. Xylar watched Jack closely. He expected the soft human to struggle immediately. He assumed that a creature without a shell or exoskeleton would be crushed by even the slightest pressure. But Jack just stood there, looking bored. He shifted his weight from one leg to the other. He looked around the room as if he were waiting for a bus. This annoyed Xylar. The instructor decided to turn the dial up to 1.2 times the normal gravity. The effect was instant for the tall aliens. The vipers, with their long, thin necks, suddenly cried out in pain. Their bodies were designed for low-gravity swamp planets. Under the increased weight, their legs began to shake violently. Two of them collapsed to the floor, wheezing for air. Xylar laughed. He enjoyed seeing them suffer. He looked at the human again, waiting for him to fall. But Jack was still standing. In fact, Jack did not even look like he noticed the change. He was inspecting his fingernails. Xylar felt a flash of anger. He pushed the dial up to 1.5 times gravity. Now, even the strong students began to fail. The Groks, the rock creatures who were supposed to be the toughest, groaned as their heavy bodies became too heavy to hold up. One by one, the massive aliens fell to their knees. The sound of their heavy bodies hitting the floor echoed in the room. The pressure was intense. It felt like an invisible giant was sitting on their shoulders. Xylar smiled, certain that the human must be flattened against the floor by now. He looked at the monitor to check Jack's status. What he saw made his jaw drop. Jack was not on the floor. He was not crying. He was not even sweating. Instead, Jack was moving. He began to rotate his head in a circle. Crack. Pop. The sound of Jack's neck joints popping echoed through the silent room. The aliens on the floor looked up in horror. They thought the human's neck had just snapped under the pressure. Xylar gasped, his hand hovering over the emergency stop button. But Jack didn't die. He just sighed with relief and rolled his shoulders back. Jack looked up at the glass window where Xylar was standing. He looked confused. He spoke loud enough for the microphone to pick up his voice. He asked if the machine was warming up, or if they were going to start the real workout soon. Xylar stared at the control panel in shock. The machine was running at high power. He frantically typed a query into the computer database about the human home world, Earth. The data flashed onto the screen in bright red warning letters. Earth was a Category 12 high-gravity world. The computer explained that humans evolved under crushing pressure that would kill most galactic species instantly. To Jack, this torture session felt like a light walk in the park. Xylar realized with a sinking feeling that he couldn't crush the human, because the universe had already tried and failed. Instructor Xylar was furious. The human had humiliated him in the gravity chamber, and he was determined to erase that mistake. He marched the class quickly down the corridor to the endurance room. This room was designed to simulate the environments of hostile planets. It was an airtight glass box with heavy vents on the ceiling and floor. Xylar shoved the students inside. The alien students were already tired and scared from the gravity test, but they obeyed. Xylar stayed safely outside behind a thick blast shield. He picked up a microphone and his voice boomed into the room. He announced that gravity was only one way to kill a soldier. He said that a true warrior must survive poison air. Inside the room, a panel opened on the wall. It contained emergency breathing masks. The masks were bulky and covered the entire face. Xylar told the class to put them on immediately. He explained that he was about to flood the room with Agent Red. This was a gas derived from a rare plant found on a death world. He warned them that this gas was a neurotoxin to most species. It would burn their eyes, melt their mucous membranes, and cause their throats to close up within seconds. The alien students scrambled in panic. They grabbed the masks and strapped them tight against their faces. They checked the seals frantically, terrified of even a single molecule touching their skin. Jack stood in the center of the room. He looked at the box of masks, but he did not move to grab one. He stood with his hands on his hips, watching the vents in the ceiling. Xylar watched him with a cruel grin. He thought the human was being stupid or arrogant. He decided not to warn him again. If the human wanted to die choking, that was his choice. Xylar pressed a large red button on his console. A hiss of pressurized air filled the room. Thick, reddish-orange mist began to pour out of the vents. It swirled around the students, clouding the air. The aliens huddled together, shaking in their suits. The gas hit Jack. Xylar leaned forward, waiting for the human to claw at his throat or fall to the ground screaming. The gas was concentrated capsaicin, the chemical that makes peppers hot, but at a level used for riot control. To an alien, it was acid. Jack blinked his eyes a few times. He sniffed the air tentatively. Then, he took a deep, long breath. He filled his lungs with the toxic, red mist. He did not cough. He did not choke. Instead, a look of recognition crossed his face. He rubbed his nose and took another deep breath, savoring the smell. Jack looked at the terrified aliens around him, then turned to the window. He spoke calmly. He said that the gas smelled delicious. He told Xylar that it smelled exactly like his grandmother's kitchen on Sunday. He explained that on Earth, they used this poison to flavor their meat and make tacos. He even mentioned that the gas was clearing up his sinuses and he felt great. The alien students stared at him through their foggy visors in absolute horror. They could not comprehend a species that ate chemical weapons for dinner. Xylar looked at his screen, his 4 hands trembling. The biological scan confirmed that the human's body was not dying, it was producing endorphins, happy chemicals. Xylar realized with terror that the human was not just tough, he was biologically insane. Instructor Xylar was now desperate. The human had survived gravity that crushed rocks and gas that melted skin. He needed something that could not be ignored. He needed fear. He took the class to the combat simulation arena. It was a massive, dark dome filled with artificial rocks, trees, and tall grass. It looked like a wild jungle at night. The air was cool and quiet. Xylar told the students that this test was simple. He was going to release a hunter droid. It was a fast, 4-legged robot designed to chase and capture targets. The goal of the lesson was not to fight. The goal was to run, hide, and survive for 10 minutes. Xylar emphasized that the droid was faster than any biological creature. He opened the cage, and a sleek, black metal machine sprinted into the darkness. The reaction of the alien students was immediate. Their instincts took over. Most of the species in the galaxy had evolved as prey animals before they became civilized. When they sensed a predator, their brains told them to flee. The lizard people scurried under large rocks, shaking with fear. The insect creatures dug holes in the dirt to bury themselves. Within 10 seconds, the arena looked empty. Every single student was hiding. Except for one. Jack stood in the middle of a clearing. He did not run. He did not look for a tree to climb. He stood with his feet planted firmly on the dirt. He closed his mouth and breathed silently through his nose. He tilted his head slightly, listening to the sound of the robot moving through the grass. Xylar watched from the safety of the control tower. He was confused again. He shouted into the microphone, telling the human to run. He warned Jack that the droid would break his ribs if it caught him. But Jack did not listen. The ancient programming of the human brain had activated. On Earth, humans were not just prey, they were persistence predators. They did not run away from danger, they chased it until it was tired. Jack's body went completely still. To a casual observer, he looked like a statue. But Xylar zoomed in with the camera and saw the truth. Jack was not frozen with fear. He was waiting. His muscles were tight and ready to snap like a loaded spring. The hunter droid moved silently through the bushes to the left. It was designed to be invisible to sensors. But Jack's eyes snapped to the left instantly. Humans possess binocular vision, eyes on the front of the face, designed to lock onto a target and judge distance perfectly. Jack tracked the movement of the grass. He could not see the robot yet, but he knew exactly where it was. He pivoted his body slowly, keeping his face pointed at the invisible threat. Xylar looked at the biometric scanner on his console. He expected to see Jack's heart rate spiking from panic. The monitor beeped steadily. Jack's heart was beating faster, but the pattern was wrong. It was not the erratic, chaotic rhythm of terror. It was a strong, powerful, and steady rhythm. The computer analyzed the hormones in Jack's blood. It was not flooding his body with chemicals to help him run away. It was flooding his body with adrenaline and cortisol to help him fight. Xylar felt a cold sweat break out on his neck. He realized that Jack was not looking for a place to hide. Jack was scanning the arena to find the best place to kill. The predator had entered the room, and it wasn't the robot. The human took a step forward, directly toward the noise, and smiled. It was a terrifying, toothy grin that promised violence. The silence in the arena did not last long. Suddenly, the bushes to Jack's right exploded. The hunter droid leaped into the air. It moved like a silver blur, aiming its metal claws directly at Jack's chest. From the control tower, it looked like a killing blow. Xylar's hand hovered over the safety button, ready to end the simulation before the human was badly hurt. But he was too slow. Jack, however, was not. Before the robot could touch him, Jack dropped his weight and pivoted. He moved with a speed that defied logic. He did not dodge away to escape, he dodged in to close the distance. Jack slammed his shoulder into the side of the metal beast midair. There was a loud, sickening crunch of metal hitting dense bone. The robot crashed into the dirt, tumbling over itself. It tried to scramble back up, its servos whining loudly. But Jack was already on top of it. This was the moment the alien instructor learned about hysterical strength. Jack's brain had fully unlocked his muscles. His face turned red as blood pumped furiously through his veins. He let out a roar that shook the glass walls of the arena. It was a guttural, deep sound that triggered a primal fear in every living thing watching. Jack grabbed the robot's front leg with both hands. He planted his feet in the dirt and pulled. His biceps bulged, tearing through the sleeves of his uniform. Metal is strong, but the leverage of a human in a rage is stronger. With a screeching sound of tearing steel, Jack ripped the robot's leg clean off its body. Sparks showered down like rain. The robot thrashed wildly, trying to cut Jack with its remaining claws. Jack did not care. He ignored the scratches on his arms. He used the severed metal leg like a club. He swung it down with terrifying force. Bang! The robot's head dented. Bang! The optical lens shattered. Bang! The robot stopped moving. Jack did not stop. He hit it again and again until the expensive machine was nothing but a pile of scrap metal and wires. Xylar stared at the scene, his mouth dry. He had expected a sparring match. He had expected the human to run or maybe try to wrestle. He had not expected total destruction. He watched the biometric readings on the screen. Jack's body temperature had spiked. He was radiating heat like a furnace. This was a biological feature called sweating, which allowed humans to cool down instantly and keep fighting when other species would overheat and collapse. Jack stood over the broken robot, chest heaving up and down. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and spat on the ground near the wreckage. The most terrifying part for Xylar was not the violence. It was what happened next. Jack looked up at the control tower again. The rage faded from his eyes. His breathing slowed down. He rolled his neck and smiled, a genuine, happy smile. The adrenaline rush had made him feel alive. To the aliens, combat was a terrified struggle for survival. To the human, it was a sport. Jack gave a thumbs up to the camera, a gesture Xylar did not understand but assumed was a sign of victory. The instructor slowly sat down in his chair, his legs too weak to hold him up. He realized that if he had actually fought the human earlier, he would have ended up just like the robot, broken and scattered in the dirt. The simulation ended, and the lights in the arena turned back on. For a long moment, nobody moved. The only sound in the huge room was the sizzling noise of the broken robot's battery. Slowly, the other alien students began to crawl out of their hiding spots. The rock creatures and the lizard people peeked over the bushes. They looked at the pile of twisted metal that used to be a terrifying hunter. Then, they looked at Jack. Before today, they thought Jack was a soft, weak pet. Now, they looked at him as if he were a monster from their darkest nightmares. They did not come close to him. They gave him a wide circle, pressing themselves against the walls to stay away from the crazy human. Instructor Xylar walked down the stairs from the control tower. His legs felt heavy and weak. He walked over to the spot where Jack was standing. Jack was stretching his arms, trying to loosen his muscles after the fight. He looked at the instructor and smiled politely. He asked Xylar if that was the end of the class because he was getting hungry. Xylar could not believe his ears. The human had just torn a war machine apart with his bare hands, and now he was thinking about lunch. Xylar looked at the metal claw that Jack had ripped off. It was thick steel. Xylar knew that no other student in the history of the academy had ever done this. Xylar pulled out his digital tablet. His claws clicked nervously on the screen. He opened the official student file for Sergeant Jack. Under the section labeled Species Risk Level, it currently said Harmless. Xylar deleted that word immediately. He typed in a new classification in bold red letters, Apex Predator, Do Not Provoke. He realized now that the galaxy had made a terrible mistake. They judged species by how they looked. They thought armor and claws made a warrior. But humans were different. Humans hid their weapons on the inside. Their bones were like iron bars, their muscles were like hydraulic pistons, and their brains were designed for war. The instructor cleared his throat and addressed the class. His voice was no longer arrogant or loud. It was soft and respectful. He told the students that the lesson was over. He pointed to Jack and told everyone that from now on, the human was the squad leader. Nobody argued. The big groks nodded quickly, too scared to disagree. The vipers bowed their heads. Jack looked surprised but shrugged his shoulders. He didn't really care about being the leader, he just wanted to find the cafeteria. He grabbed his towel, wiped his face, and walked toward the exit. As he walked, the sea of aliens parted to let him through, like water moving away from a shark. Xylar watched Jack leave the room. He felt a deep sense of relief that the human was on their side. He thought about the future enemies of the Galactic Alliance. He almost felt sorry for them. They would see the soft, pink skin of the humans and think they were weak, just like Xylar had done. They would attack, thinking it would be an easy fight. And then, they would meet the monsters that lived beneath the skin. Xylar closed his tablet and turned off the lights in the ruined arena. He made a mental note to never, ever challenge a human to a fight again. The lesson was learned: in a galaxy full of monsters, the humans were the ones checking under the bed.